Look, are there problems?
For instance, you're supporting the mayor of LA for re-election after these terrible fires that a lot of your citizens do feel was in part because of government mismanagement. Do you just reject that narrative that the government has anything to do with these things?
I absolutely accept that we all should be held to a higher level of accountability in terms of our governance. And I think there's many areas of reforms that are necessary, and so many areas of reforms that were underway. But the general notion that in the middle of winter, with 100-mile-an-hour winds or attached to a fire, that somehow, by the way, there were 16 major fires in Southern California over a 2-week period, that somehow that had to do with fire hydrants is rather preposterous.
And yet now, still, more than a year later, they don't have permits. Almost nobody is building. So I haven't told this to Lee Zeldin yet, but I'm going to put you in charge of getting permits. I think we're going to override the local authorities because they're never going to have it.
So the fraud situation continues to unravel for Gavin Newsom. I think you are watching the next Tim Walz waiting to happen. We'll explain what we mean by that, but I think it's very important amidst all of this outrage against ICE in Minnesota, the protests, the riots, the government shutdowns, the hysterical media, to actually remember the core reason of why ICE is in that city to begin with. What is the issue that Democrats are trying so desperately to distract everyone from that started this all? And that is, of course, not just the local story of Somali fraud, but I would argue the national story of how it basically got exposed that the Democrat Party is a giant criminal organization that was running a mass money laundering operation in order to buy votes and basically maintain a political machine. It is the classical corruption story that you might associate with a movie like Gangs of New York or some random country in former Yugoslavia, but no, instead that was happening right here in the United States, and it was being perpetrated by one of the two major parties. And frankly, I think it explains a lot about, first of all, how the Democrat Party, despite such unpopular people and insane ideas, manages to keep so much political power in this country. Is it really because the country split 50-50? Or is it because, let me just say, they're winning elections by a lot less democratic or transparent means than you may believe? Well, I think the answer there is obvious. I think the answer is also obvious as to why you're seeing such a defensive and angry response, both on the airwaves and in the streets, to what ICE is doing. Because what is ICE doing? They are essentially breaking the power base that Democrats have in this country. Whether that's their voters or that's the census counts that Democrats need to keep congressional seats in this country, or even the way in which, let's not forget, some of their major rising stars have had their careers ended. Tim Walz has announced he will not be seeking re-election or any other office. Why? Was it because he did nothing wrong or there was no scandal around him? No, it was because when it all came out, it was pretty damning. And now the fact that potentially their 2028 presidential frontrunner, and someone I would argue probably is their strongest candidate, that being Gavin Newsom, right, could also be the target of this very type of expose. No wonder you're seeing so much panic. No wonder, by the way, why Gavin Newsom himself, a man who we've been covering for the entire past year or so, the fraud in California, the embezzlement, the mismanagement and abuse of public funds, frankly, that rabbit hole runs way deeper than it even does in Minnesota, whether that's the high-speed train, homelessness funding, illegal aliens receiving healthcare, all of that stuff, right? Why Gavin Newsom likewise seems to have been keeping a low profile over the past couple of months and is trying to distract his audience by attending things like the World Economic Forum and not directly addressing the issues actually plaguing his own state. Because yes, obviously the truth is dangerous for Democrats, and so when that truth gets exposed, this is a massive problem. But ladies and gentlemen, this week we have some even more updates and new fraud stories, whether that's Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass getting awfully defensive as to why the wildfire rebuilding process in Los Angeles County is taking so long, or this new scandal of fraudulent Medicare and hospice centers being operated around the state By the way, taking even more money than the fraudulent Somali healthcare and daycare companies over in Minnesota. And even it could not get any worse, right? Nick Shirley, ladies and gentlemen, has now showed up in California as well. Let's not forget he's the original citizen journalist who essentially ended Tim Walz's career. And this could be important because the entire 2028 election for the Democrats could potentially hang in the balance of whether Gavin Newsom's career is able to survive the same scrutiny that Tim Walz's did not, except perhaps maybe even worse. All right, that said, let's get into all of this, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all the latest news and coverage. And that said, some updates, recent updates, right? On different California fraud scandals. Well, let's of course start with the wildfire rebuilding process, which, as you could imagine, has been a complete disaster. That's why just a few days ago, President Trump signed this executive order aimed at taking over the wildfire rebuilding process in LA County, which involved things like, hey, getting rid of a lot of the bureaucratic red tape, right? Removing the insane amount of permitting you need to get done in Los Angeles to build new houses. Because look, these people are literally homeless right now. We need to give them something, right? And also even unlocking potentially new funding that would allow them to rebuild there. You may think to yourself, what possibly could be the local Democrats' contention with that? Don't they want help? Don't they want to see people have their homes rebuilt? Well, I would point out, first of all, that makes it a lot harder to turn the zone into some type of climate change area or Section 8 housing like liberals want to do, because, you know, if there's actually a neighborhood finally built there, then it'd be a lot harder to abuse the land. But then secondly, okay, another point I like to make about this, because we always have to now delve into the potential motives of these people. Why, let me ask this question, right? Why would local Democrats be mad that Trump is trying to override the permitting process for new housing, which, by the way, is extremely difficult in California? There's a reason why housing prices have exploded there, because it's impossible to build new homes. Could it have something to do with the fact that the government contractors and bureaucrats who are or the ones responsible for reviewing those permits, the fees you have to pay to the local government to have those permits issued, the inspections, all of those things, likewise, are part of the political machine, right? You don't think that California Democrats profit and benefit from all of this permitting and all these new taxes and all this garbage you have to pay? Of course, that's the answer, I would argue. But anyways, take a listen here to some of these details. The White House on Tuesday announced that President Trump signed an executive order with an aim to cut through bureaucratic red tape and speed up reconstruction in the Pacific Palisades and Eaton Canyon areas 1 year after devastating wildfires destroyed nearly 40,000 acres of homes and businesses. Again, why could you possibly not want to cut through bureaucratic red tape? Take a listen here, though, for those full details.
The president signed an executive order he claims will cut bureaucratic red tape and speed up reconstruction in the Pacific Palisades and Eaton Canyon wildfire areas. He's also taking aim at the governor and L.A. Mayor Karen Bass.
Eyewitness News reporter Rob Hayes joining us live from the newsroom with all the details. Rob?
You know, on the surface, it may sound like President Trump's executive order will help speed up the rebuilding process in the wake of the wildfires. But state and local leaders are blasting the move and accusing Trump of slowing the whole process down. Now, it's been more than a year since the Palisades and Eaton fires ripped through the LA area, destroying thousands of homes. Trump late last week signed an executive order that does two things. It seeks to bypass city and county building regulations, and it orders an audit of $3 billion in federal hazard mitigation grant program funds that were granted to California to prevent future fires.
Oh, okay, I see why they're mad. Because it involves an audit. How dare you? Democrats, it's not the first time, by the way, Democrats have done this. We saw the same story back in the Doge fights last year. Hey, how dare you, federal government, ask for an audit of where your own money is going, right? Let's not forget, USAIDs did the same thing. The state of Minnesota reacted in a very similar fashion. They were terrified to hand over the records of where that money was spent. Now, let me point out to people, it doesn't seem like all of that an unreasonable request, right? When you think about it, I've made the analogy before. Okay, if your kid asks you for $20 and you ask for what? What do you need $20 for? And they're like, what? You're not allowed to ask me? That's an invasion of my privacy. You know, you're causing problems. You're being a fascist. You think, wait, huh? You know, And by the way, if they don't want to tell you where the money is going, then suffice it to say, the money's probably not going to a good place, you know? Same thing if you're an investor and you're giving money to a startup company and you ask, what are you going to spend it on? They won't tell you. They're probably freaking embezzling it, right? I mean, if they don't want to give you the answer to that, it's a pretty safe assumption. Same story here. But anyways, all right, let's take a listen here as to why actually local leaders are apparently so upset, right? They're not upset that year after year they fail on this wildfire stuff, you know? They absolutely do not manage the forest. They don't manage water. It burns every single year. They say they're going to do better. Every year it gets worse. And then the rebuilding, likewise, is a disaster because it's California. But no, let's hear their excuse as to why it's Trump's fault.
But state and local officials say Trump has been the biggest obstacle to rebuilding, blocking a nearly $34 billion disaster relief request from reaching Congress, essentially choking off rebuilding funds. Now, Governor Gavin Newsom this morning tweeting, with 1,625 plus home permits issued, hundreds of homes under construction, and permitting timelines at least 2 times faster than before the fires, an executive order to rebuild Mars would do just as useful. The feds need to release funding, not take over local permit approval speed. The main obstacle is communities not having the money to rebuild. Now, last month, Newsom talked about how California is working to get Trump to let the funding request go through to Congress.
The consensus opinion is Congress is there. We have bipartisan support from all our Republican representatives in California. We continue to work with them and Democratic representatives. It's just moving the president of the United States. And that's difficult. And no one's naive about it. And we'll continue to keep punching.
Yeah, so you got that? Basically, their excuse as to why this has taken so long is because we need more money, right? No, actually, let me just ask the question, though. What happened the last 20 times we just gave you more money, California, right? Do I need to go into all of that? The repeated examples of how when given a lot of money, and by the way, your state does have a lot of money, you have completely, hey, you know, how'd that high-speed rail go, right? Federal government helped to fund that for a very long time, you know? How about the last several times with wildfires? You know, one thing I said, if you go back and watch my content from this exact time last year, is that I absolutely refuse to hand California a blank check just to, rebuild and let's do that again with absolutely no guarantees. And that's basically now what California has asked for. Okay? No, the reason why we're not just going to give you a blank check, and yes, I would argue the federal government should oversee this process way more than your state is, because your state has shown time and time again what happens when you're given a blank check. You'll just embezzle it. And now you're going to run here and, you know, pretend as an innocent actor, if you just gave us more money, the process would be fine, because California, as you know, always gets its budget estimates correct. They're never over budget or past due on projects, and it's all Donald Trump's fault that we can't rebuild. Yeah, okay. Of course, I'd also ask the question, if you're such amazing Democrats and you make a point to, of course, tax the rich, and you're very progressive and government funding, we believe in big government, unlike those red states who just want their children to be uneducated and all these things, then Gavin Newsom, why can't your own state pay for it? Right? You have a lot of money. You tax people pretty high. What's the answer there? Could it have something to do with the fact that your state is currently now operating at a budget deficit because, no joke, you spent too much money giving free healthcare to illegal aliens? And now you want the federal government's help? You say the state can't finance it yourself? Well, you managed to finance $8 billion in Medi-Cal for illegals, right? Speaking of which, we do have a major update on that, so take a listen.
Let's talk about illegal immigrants. So Gavin Newsom was giving us a hard time for threatening the health insurance of illegal immigrants. Just to be very transparent, if you're on Medicare, you don't get free dental, you don't get free vision. You do if you're an illegal immigrant in California.
This is the infuriating part.
So you've got taxpayers in New Mexico, right, which is a blue state but a poor state, paying extra tax dollars to the federal government that are recycled back into LA to deal with the fraud that I'm talking about. So illegal immigrants, he's mad. We're horrible people. We're Republicans. You have no conscience. You have no heart. As soon as we made it clear we were no longer going to pay for illegal immigrants in California, what did he do? He took them off Med-Cal. Now, he didn't take them off. He took them up on the federal side. So in theory, only emergency services are going to get paid for illegal immigrants in California, which is a national law.
And is reasonable.
Reasonable. Now, we want babies delivered, car accident victims,
of course.
Of course get health care, but not elective hernia surgery, cataracts. You have to be an American citizen who paid into the system to get these. So anyway, we deal with this. Gavin says we're only going to pay for illegal immigrants through our own state-based system. We've audited him now. This data is coming out this week. We have now found over $1.5 billion of money spent wrongly. We've audited it. They're not even arguing. $1.5 billion from that California charged the federal government for illegal immigrants that they're not allowed to pay charges for. They have to pay for it themselves. He's not happy, but they're paying us because they know we're right.
Yeah, hold on a minute. Did you catch the math there? So California was spending $100 billion on illegals. And Gavin Newsom, how much did you say you needed to rebuild the Palisades? Oh, that's right, $34 billion? I mean, call me a simpleton, but it seems to me like the money would be there if you literally stopped spending it on illegals, right? If you can spend $100 billion on illegal aliens, please tell me where the $34 billion is for the Pacific Palisades. You try to make it any excuse you want. Oh, well, they're coming from different parts of the budget. This is for healthcare. This is for disaster relief. I don't care. The point is what? The money that California is seething and crying they don't have, they clearly had, and what do they choose to do with it? Spend it on illegal aliens. It is actually a prime example of what we talked about earlier today, right? The reason why leftist politics fail, the reason why if you're a well-intended Democrat voter who thinks to themselves, well, I voted to get more government programs, I want more assistance, I want better education for my children, but I vote for Democrats and none of that happens. Where does the money go, right? Because it literally goes to illegal aliens. Like, we're not making that up, okay? The Democrat Party, the party historically of things like, fixing the roads, more union workers, helping teachers and education and all these things, actually in 2026 is unable to fulfill any of its historic promises. Why? Because literally they're just so maniacally obsessed with importing a bunch of third worlders and giving money to them instead, likely because they understand they're not popular enough with Native American citizens. So instead, I guess they got to import their voter base instead. That's actually what happens, And ladies and gentlemen, it does indeed get much worse. We've told you many California fraud stories already on this channel. But this week, Dr. Oz has exposed a brand new scheme, okay? A 7-fold increase in hospice care in LA County that disproportionately just does not match the rest of the country. $3.5 billion in hospice and home health care. Yet, you'll notice here that the numbers don't seem to add up. Looks a lot like these stories we saw out of Minneapolis, but it may run deeper in places like Los Angeles County.
I'm here in Los Angeles at the U.S. Attorney's Office. We're talking about fraud. This place has become one of the epicenters for fraud, waste, and abuse in America. $3.5 billion just here in Los Angeles County, we think, around hospice and home health care. Then you add in all the other things like they have in Minnesota, but in California scale, it's huge. And what we have witnessed is a 7-fold increase in hospice in LA County. 7-fold. That doesn't happen naturally. There are not 7 times more deaths in LA County than there were 5 years ago. These fraudsters, and these do tend to be foreign influences. These are Russian Armenian gangs, Mafia, that are leading a lot of these efforts, we believe, have been able to corrupt and work with doctors who are willing to lie, to use that MD degree, as a license to kill. A lot of it's driven by foreigners who came to Los Angeles, very different culture, Russian Armenian groups, and this mafia seems to have taken over the system. They've corrupted doctors, they've normalized fraud so that everyone sort of expects it, but the magnitude of it is so great that we have to take it on aggressively. It's a focus area for CMS, and this administration under President Trump is not going to tolerate taxpayer dollars being stolen because people aren't paying attention anymore.
Hey, Dana, you have ghost patients, sham companies, offshore owners, corrupt doctors here in LA scamming billions for patients that don't exist and care they never provide. Now, many seniors don't even know they've been enrolled until they need real medical care but can't get it because the hospice controls their Medicare number.
They're human traffickers. They're trafficking beneficiaries.
Hospice fraud in LA.
Hospice is crazy here. You've got hospice that's grown 7-fold in the last 5 years. They represent about $3.5 billion of fraud, we believe, just in LA County.
We are ground zero for the scammers.
Sheila Clark says hundreds of LA hospices falsely bill the government for unnecessary care, often cycling patients from one provider to another.
It's a non-ending benefit. That hospice is making, $4,000 a month, indefinitely.
Patients are bought and sold like trading cards. Ads tell recruiters to post up at busy shopping centers or senior living addresses to knock on doors. They promise patients walkers, wheelchairs, and can earn $300 for any senior over 62 they sign up, sick or not.
Their entire job is to go and find seniors that they can get money for.
Those patients and their Medicare numbers are then sold to providers.
A Medicare MIB number is more lucrative than a credit card.
How much money are federal taxpayers being taken for?
Millions, billions.
These are Russian Armenian gangs, Mafia, that are leading a lot of these efforts, we believe, have been able to corrupt and work with doctors who are willing to lie.
If you don't have the physician, you don't have anything.
One doctor billed the government $120 million in a single year, claiming to oversee 1,900 patients. With almost 2,000 hospice agencies, LA County has more than 36 states combined, and 30 times more than either Florida or New York.
18% of the whole country's home health care billing is coming out of Los Angeles County. How is that possible?
And that chart just tells you everything, right? So you got 58 of the hospice centers in Florida. Keep in mind, Florida is a place full of retirees, full of geriatric people. 1,900 in Los Angeles County alone. I really wonder what's going on there. And folks, this is arguably even worse than, say, the fraudulent Somali healthcare centers, because at least the Somali ones basically just aren't actually like using real patients or whatever. No, in this case, they're stealing patients. They're basically human trafficking them around to different healthcare centers. They're stealing the Medicare numbers so that way these senior citizens cannot get actual legitimate healthcare services. And I kid you not, this whole operation is being run by Eastern European mafias that we weren't even sure still even existed these days, but it turns out that's exactly what's going on. And I only just asked the question, why is it that so many organized money laundering networks seem to always operate out of liberal states with more favorable welfare policies, right? So you got the Somali criminals up in Minneapolis. You got a bunch of Eastern European ones operating out of a place like Los Angeles. New York, by the way, I'm sure it happens a lot there. Maybe there was this perception, right, that the mafia and its connected political corruption was sort of broken up in the 60s and the 90s, and that stuff doesn't happen anymore. And by the way, it's not associated with the Democrat Party anymore, because let's not forget, that's always the party that mafia and organized crime has historically been associated with. But nope, turns out we're still seeing that here today. On top of all the other fraud we already know about. I mean, homelessness, high-speed rail, it goes on and on. Take a listen, however, to Gavin Newsom's response to all of this, because I think it tells you a lot. So, first of all, let me just remind everyone, this is the defense Tim Walz used for a very long time, and then he ended his political career, so just keep an eye on that. But anyways, Gavin Newsom admits there's massive fraud in California, but says he's, quote, been after it for years and years before Dr. Oz was even on the scene. Oh, really? You have been now, right? Just like Tim Walz has been prosecuting the fraudsters long before the Trump administration. And how dare you politicize it? Oh, yeah.
Dr. Oz might have, you're living in Oz when he went down attacking the Armenian community just a few days ago. A business that's down now 30%. Poor guy, small businessman, running a bakery because he decided to do a little TikTok video or something, saying they're somehow connected to the mob around hospice. Well, hospice, we've been after that for years and years before Oz was even on the scene. 2021, we did a moratorium on new hospice program. 280 we shuttered. We've been after this for years and years and years. We want an open hand, not a closed fist. We absolutely are here to be a partner to go after waste, fraud, and abuse. I started something called ODI, Office Digital Innovation. I did not, my mistake, do it with a chainsaw. Had I done that, you would know about it. We just began the Office of Digital Innovation And we started to begin a process of reforming our procurement and our strategies on technology across the board, but also on the issues of waste, fraud, and abuse. By the way, ODI was a partnership with the Health and Human Service to create the new EBD card, which again is leading the nation. I'm humbled in this perspective. No one's denying these issues, but let's also not deny this is purely political.
Yeah, well, you know what, Gavin Newsom? You're right in the sense that there absolutely is a political angle to it. And frankly, as a conservative, I have to say it's really awfully convenient that people like you and Tim Walz and some of the top leaders of the Democrat Party are so transparently engaged in these criminal enterprises, because it makes our job a lot easier. But you know why you've become a political target of this? You know how you could have avoided this whole political battle? By simply not allowing, abetting, and likely yourself engaging in fraud and corruption to begin with. It really is that simple. You don't want Republicans to politicize it, then you could have done your job this entire time. Of course, Gavin Newsom, much like we saw Tim Walz do a month before he announced the end of his career, right? Just remember that again. Likewise, is now saying, look, we've created a new office for fraud. Look, my state is going to do something about it now, finally, despite the numerous scandals and embezzlement that you saw under my administration. When, let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that Gavin Newsom literally is set to leave office at the start of next year, okay? So he's been governor for about 7 years now, never did anything about fraud, but now suddenly he's cleaning it up after he and his fellow Democrats profited millions of dollars off of it. And see, there's nothing to see here, right? And sure, just screaming it's political is gonna make it go away, right? He basically admitted, right? Oh, it's absolutely real, it's happening, but when Republicans talk about it, they're just politicizing it. I don't know. It sounds kind of guilty to me, frankly. But anyways, that said, guys, there you essentially have it. So let me just say, keep an eye on Newsom, right? Let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.